And so SA Tourism seems to be limping from one crisis to another. First, it was the proposed sponsorship deal with Tottenham Hotspur, and shortly after that, resignations of 3 board members followed amid reports of impropriety at the state entity. Let's get a sense of what this all means from Brand Africa chairperson Thebe Ikalafeng, who used to be on the board of SA Tourism as well. Thank you very much for your time. A happy Sunday to you.
Happy Sunday to you. Thank you.
Before we start the conversation, I'd like for us to take a listen at this from the acting CEO of of SA Tourism, I beg your pardon. Let's take a listen at this.
The envisaged deal that we're looking at has got absolutely nothing to do with football. Let me look straight in the camera. It's got nothing to do with football. It's got to do with accessing the aggregated audiences that football brings. That's who we are after. We are after the viewers of football, the followers of football that have got the spend and the willingness to travel long haul into our destination.
Thebe Ikalafeng, what do you make of the overall tone of the acting CEO of SA Tourism as he delivered that press conference on Thursday?
Well, I think one will have to say that perhaps there's a better way to deliver that message, particularly because you are dealing with state funds. You are dealing and in the context of people who see that there's better alternate use for the money. So I would have dealt with it a bit differently. I would have been maybe a little bit humbler and perhaps a little bit more conciliatory and a bit to be seen to be more listening rather than a steamroll through with my idea.
Speaking of that, right, and the tone of the country at the moment, how would you describe the mood in South Africa when we take a look at this proposed deal?
$1 billion can do a lot in the country. $1 billion can do a lot in the country that is suffering from debilitating collapse of infrastructure. We don't have energy. Water is contaminated. Beaches are contaminated as well. So there's no housing. There's joblessness. To me, that's the mood that I look at. So when I look at the proposal of $1 billion to spend on getting more eyeballs to look at South Africa, the way I look at it is to come and look at what? To look at the state of the nation as it is now, to look at the state of the nation that should be and could be better than it is.
But we understand that this is done for South Africans, right? Because there is a proposed return on investment peaking in the billions of rands that will make more than what we are taking out. And so how do we measure that value?
I'm not sure. Well, let's look at how you measure sponsorship in its basic form. In its basic form, I always reduce it to the ABC or the ABCDE. So in the A, of course, is the awareness. You look at will it enable awareness? Will it generate awareness for the country? We don't need any more awareness. Our country is well known as a well-known product. Our flag is one of the top 3 most recognized in the world. We have successfully staged the Rugby World Cup. We successfully staged 2010 FIFA World Cup and many other events in this country with the host for BRICS this year. So the attention on South Africa is quite well established. So we don't need any more new eyes, and particularly eyes from the UK because that's one of our biggest source markets and one of our successful and our top source markets as a country in terms of people who visit South Africa. The second one is, I'd say, the B, or in a sense, A, B, C, D. And the B part to me is the brand alignment. So the question that you look at when you look at any sponsorship, you ask yourself a question, is there an alignment between that brand and who we are? So from a brand alignment perspective, this property, Tottenham Hotspur, has not won anything significant in the last 30 years. We've been around for 30 years as a new democracy. I'm not sure about the parallels that are implied. That are you saying that we are not a winning nation if you're going to partner us with really a second-class English Premiership team that perhaps only has an appeal when they're playing somebody else more significant than them? I'm not sure that's a country the brand that I want to associate our brand with. And I'm assuming now that we're going with a sponsorship of a nature. And the C part is a conversion. And I already spoke, conversion is really how you bring people into, how the idea leads to people. Now the measurement has been bandied around that we get 6 billion AVE, or which is advertising value equivalent. In other words, if I would have gotten, for my billion, I'm going to get 6 billion worth of advertising value equivalent. We don't want to measure value equivalent. What we want to measure is the conversion of people coming into South Africa. And the eyes that we're looking for in UK and all this I've said earlier, they're already coming to South Africa. The challenge that we have as a country is not to get more advertising, but to get more eyeballs onto South Africa. It's not to, it is rather to ensure that when they do come here to South Africa, that our house is in order, that they're not going to get maimed, they're not going to get raped, they're not going to fall through potholes, they're not going to drive through the dark, that they're going to come to a country which we all know is perhaps one of the most beautiful from a built infrastructure as well as a natural infrastructure.
I appreciate that analogy, especially the B part, because it would seem we're associating ourselves with the B team. But if we, if we then take a look at, you know, that comparison between what Rwanda did and what South Africa wants to do, it said, well, it's, you know, Rwanda did it, and so it worked for Rwanda. How should we understand that? What do we know about the dynamics of how it's worked for Rwanda?
I'm so glad you brought that example because everybody keeps saying Rwanda did it, Mauritius did it, Malaysia did it. We're a country that was always known to be innovative, to be first to market, to be leading in the continent. We're the #1 tourist market in sub-Saharan Africa. 73% of the people who come to South Africa come from the continent itself. So, Rwanda did it? Yes, Rwanda did it. Why did Rwanda do it? Rwanda did it because Rwanda came out of a very difficult position in 1994, the genocide. But then, if you know Rwanda as well as I do, probably one of the most cleanest countries to go to, renowned for its disdain for corruption, renowned for its leadership in technology, renowned for attracting meetings into Rwanda, renowned now for positioning itself as the country that can help to lead Africa forward. You can't compare us to Rwanda. Rwanda did not have the tourism base that we have. Rwanda is a 15 million population country. We're a 60, 70, 100, who's counting anymore? We're a big country with an established tourism base, established tourism attraction. We cannot compare ourselves to Rwanda. They're coming from a completely different base than we are. So is Mauritius. Matter of fact, Mauritius and Rwanda are quite interesting because those are two of some of the best countries to do business in Africa, where Mauritius is positioning itself as a place, as the headquarters of the continent, if you will, and they're attracting people to the continent. And if you look at the cost comparisons as well, Mauritius, I think, went for about £2 million, with Liverpool, I think, and then Rwanda went with for $25 million with Arsenal. So can't compare us.
Yeah.
We're three different countries at all. And our problems are compounded right now. So the ordinary South African is asking themselves, if I'm living on less than $5 a day, if I'm scrambling to put a roof over my head, food on my table, to get my children through quality schools, which we know is also a problem right now, quality education, they're asking themselves the question, so they've got an extra $1 billion to spend in something else. My view is simple, and I've heard them, and I've heard the arguments. The arguments have been, oh, but our job is just tourism. Yes. Somebody else's job is electricity. Somebody else's job. That money comes from the same kitty, and that kitty is filled up by the South Africans who are paying tax and those who depend on the tax. So the question one should always ask, is this the best alternative use to help build brand South Africa?
Having sat on the board, who advises, right, the powers that be that then come out and say, give me the camera, where's that camera? Let me tell you as a matter of fact, is there a deal? No. Is there intention? Yes. You know, so who advises them? Because what you're saying makes a lot of sense.
Well, let's go with governance. Let's go first with the governance perspective, then we'll talk about posturing and all those things. From a governance perspective, because I've also seen those questions around whether a minister or treasury or any of those. From a governance perspective, the executive filters through the proposals which come to the executive. And then the executive takes those to the board. And then when they get to the board, the first important question is, how is this going to help build the business or to improve the business? But the second most important question is, given the quantum of the money, which is the third of the annual income of tourism, or the annual grant rather, to tourism. The second most important a board will ask is this within our delegation of authority? In other words, do we have the rights to sign off on such a thing? I guess that's what the minister's talking about when she says, I'm waiting for a presentation from the board. Because that money will definitely be beyond the delegation of authority. Because one, it was not part of a pot or a budget that was earmarked for building Brand South Africa or Brand South African tourism for this fiscal year, which ends in March. Matter of fact, if somebody has got 300 million left by the end of February, the question we should be asking ourselves is, why have the money not been spent in what it was earmarked for? So I mean, those are so that's from a governance perspective. It will then have to go to boards, and boards to Ministry of Tourism, from Ministry of Tourism to Treasury, because you now are looking for a deviation, and then the deviation will require a string of signatures. So who advises somebody when they come on on television and all those things? I mean, we all should be experienced media people, given the positions we have. So in any organization, I mean, I don't think I would have called a press conference. I'm just saying me, Thebe Ikalafeng. I just would not have called a press conference.
Why not?
Because you see, when you call a press conference, you're putting yourself out there, particularly if you don't have all the information and all the ducks in a row. I think in this instance, for example, is it a deal, is it not a deal? Has it been signed or has it not been signed? Have you consulted all the stakeholders or have you not consulted stakeholders? Is it a third of the money or is it 100% of the money? What exactly is the ROI? So you have to first see through all those questions. You tick through all those questions. I would not have called a press conference. I would have just simply have a very clear statement and then present it to the media. Posturing, who advises you? 2 or 3 people. One is yourself. From yourself, it's a style thing. From a style, it says, how do I want to be seen when I engage with publics? Because remember, this is not a private entity. This is a South African entity. And the second thing, the second one is the person who will advise you perhaps will be the communications people, either your agency or your team internally. And they will say, Sir, Madam, or Chief, as they say in government, or CEO, as they say in government. They'll say to you, we think this is how we should approach this. You could perhaps tell from this tone that perhaps the idea was, make sure it is seen to be decisive, to be clear, and that we are going ahead, come rain or shine. You must show that when you get onto that media. I'm just trying to deduce from how I see things. I mean, I was out of the country and I was getting all these calls, and people says, "What's happening in your country?" And, you know.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, speaking of that, and I'd like for us maybe to take a look at the decision of the board members who've since left. Let's just take a look, listen at what Mr. Khumalo said about the contract. Let's take a look, listen at this.
So this whole thing that we have now signed off, R1 billion, to some team, get your facts straight. There is no signed contract. And let that be clear. Is there an intention to? Absolutely. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. So we still have to go through the due diligence. We've got to go through all of our treasury regulations. We've got to make sure that this, meets all of the compliance requirements of the government of South Africa. We are a public entity. We would not rush and go and do things that are not in line with the governance of the country. So, let me say it on record. No signed contract. Going through governance process. Once we've done that, we will let you know.
In fact, there was a point in time when he said the person who leaked this information, what they did was un-South African-like, and they will be isolated. And could this possibly have triggered then that resignation of the board amongst everything else?
I'm not sure, and I don't have the facts. But what I do know for certain is I know Ravi very well, and I know Enver very well, the other board members, because I served with them. Remember, I served 10 years, and including as deputy chairperson of the board. So I served with those two gentlemen distinctly, distinctly rather, and they were they perhaps are among the most experienced board members, and certainly in the tourism and hospitality sector. So I can tell you, one never knows, but I know this much. I do not think they would have done anything ever improper in relation to what is being accused of all those. I mean, I think it is unfortunate, actually, to hear on a media perspective space, like I heard from the spokesperson from Tottenham, breaking this news that there's a investigation. I did call the two gentlemen because I happen to be good friends, and from the industry, from the board, and I said, what's this nonsense I hear about you guys being investigated? They said, your information is breaking news to us as well. We don't know anything about investigations on us. So I can't speak for the third person because I don't know the third person. But certainly those two I can call. Where in terms of who leaked this information, I think the South African thing to do is, when somebody in an organization, whether it is a security guard, whether it is a tea lady, whether it is a board member, an executive, when they suspect or they feel that something is not necessarily in line with what they would have expected of the organization, they have an obligation to come forward and say something makes me uncomfortable. I think they have an obligation. The fact that they will be dealt with decisively, well, I think that's a very unfortunate choice of words as well, because we have what we have in the works, a Whistleblower Act, if you will, and the idea about instituting such an act or all those is precisely to protect the very citizens, the patriots of the Republic of South Africa, whom, when they come across information which they believe is anti-South African, then have the obligation and the freedom to be able to speak without fear or favor.
Essentially, what does this do for brand South Africa, especially perceived from a South African point of view?
Well, there's a lot of excitement. I see people on Twitter and all those things saying all these experts about Thebe, so-called experts, about Thebe, going on about how this money should be going everywhere else instead of what it does. So there's a lot of chatter in the public space and the social media internationally. There's a lot of chatter around this. I don't think it's the publicity we need. Some people think that any publicity is good publicity. This is definitely not the publicity we need, because what it says about South Africa globally, it says that this country is disorganized, this country's priorities are misaligned, this country does not see where the biggest issues are. Because when you switch the lights on and you lock up the criminals, this country will be a great country to welcome the visitors. Our house is not in order.
Hey, even the president or the office of the presidency making it known that the president believes this is not justified. So we'll see how it plays itself out.
We'll see how it plays out.
Always a great pleasure. Thank you very much for your time. Thebe Ikalafeng, Brand Africa founder and chairman. Ms. Rachel